how many trips were you doing on a daily basis, and how many vehicles were you running at the time that you were only working 2 hours a day?
It was like 25 to 35 vehicles. We were generating about 6 figures a month.
Wow.
Yeah.
Welcome back to NEMT Experts. I've got Noah Nuru with me, who has had quite a journey in the NEMT space. So, Noah, many years ago, you followed in your parents' footsteps into NEMT. You co-founded Elite Care Transports, which is a non-emergency medical transport company based in Texas. You then started outsourcing your dispatching operations to the Philippines, and you co-founded Medivance Outsourcing, which not only worked for your own NEMT business, then you doubled down and decided, hey, this is working great. This Philippines-based operation should do dispatching for other NEMT businesses. And you grew that business. And somewhere in the meantime, you also served on the Technology Advisory Board of NEMT, which is the main NEMT industry association. In addition to some other things you've done done quite a bit in this space. How you doing, Noah?
Yeah, I'm doing well, man. And you seem like you've done a lot of research. So that's good.
A little bit.
Yeah.
Noah, I've done a cursory overview of you. Can you give us a quick intro of yourself and an overview of your journey in the NEMT space before we dive in deep?
Yeah, absolutely, man. So like you said, my parents started in California around 2008, 2009. So I was aware NEMT was on my radar. I didn't necessarily get into it until 2016. So that's when I really started to experience NEMT. I never really wanted to go in the California market. So I didn't want to go to the NEMT market within California because I saw how saturated it was. I ended up being fortunate and blessed to go to Texas for different reasons. But I started prior to NEMT, I was really doing drop shipping. And this ties into the outsourcing, right? Because a lot of what I did with drop shipping required outsourcing. And that's how I started my relationship in the Philippines. And then once I transitioned into, like you mentioned, Elite Care Transport, I really didn't want to follow the footsteps of my dad in terms of how he ran the operations. I liked the market, but he was driving all day. He had the phone on him all night. He was filling out invoices, 2-3 hours at the end of his shift. And I saw that and I was like, that's not, for me, business is all about freedom, right? Freedom of time, spending time with family, do the things you enjoy. And so once I realized I can outsource for like pennies on the dollar to do all of those things, and I just focus on the business, that's when I became enticed with NEMT and this challenge of how can I incorporate these two different business models and create a system that really just automates and runs on its own. And yeah, man, I had an opportunity in 2016. I partnered with my father's friend, and we did really well. I mean, the system worked really well. All right. So yeah, we essentially decided to, we started the company in Texas. The market was just way better.
And this is in 2016 that you started, right?
Yeah, late 2016, early 2017, I believe, around that time. Elite Care Transports. Yeah, that's how we started. And so we ended up doing really well. I mean, the system worked really well. I mean, there was a lot of learning curves in applying and, understanding that although there's a lot of strength, there's a lot of pros to having people in the Philippines. You also have to deal with like the language barrier, ensuring that you give them proper directions, the policies, procedures, just really having everything cookie cuttered so that they can follow it. And then that's when they started to work at their best. And so we implemented that, and yeah, like 2 years into it, I mean, I was working 2 hours a day. I mean, I had the whole thing on autopilot. There were sometimes I wouldn't even look at my phone, like it was just, I was only needed to create systems around new issues, right? Because for me, everything's about automation. So anytime there's a problem.
Let me ask you this. How many trips were you doing on a daily basis, and how many vehicles were you running at the time that you were only working 2 hours a day?
It was like 25 to 35 vehicles. We were generating about 6 figures a month at that time.
Wow.
Yeah. So that was because COVID came in. COVID was good financially, like professionally speaking. COVID is really where things ramped up. And so, yeah, I mean, that was the system. And that was kind of the goal, right? The goal was to automate. I didn't want to be required. In any business I go into, I don't want to be required. I want to be able to create systems around it. And with technology, it was just so easy. It was just perfect timing. You had like, softwares that were for dispatching that you can then have people in the Philippines. You had call center systems that would transfer over there. I mean, it was just like perfect timing. And now it's even easier. I mean, you got companies like you who just push a button, run Bambi, run. You know what I mean? Like, you don't need someone in-house to do those things, especially in California where you got to pay a lot for your employees, the union, you got to deal with insurances, time off, right? Like, it was just such a relief to be able to just, have that freedom. So that was the goal.
So let's dive into this step by step of you outsourcing to the Philippines and getting a lot of your work basically automated away on autopilot. So before 2016, you're in the drop shipping business, and that's when you establish your relationships with folks in the Philippines, right?
Right.
And how did you go about that?
So, because my mind it's always been the same, right? It's always been about systems, operations, backend. So we applied that to drop shipping. I was heavy into drop shipping, and I saw their potential. I saw what they were able to do, what they were capable of, what their strengths were, and I had already known the NEMT industry, right? Because my dad, I watched them, I worked with them, so I already had it mentally. I knew that this could potentially be something big based on the two different experiences I've had. And it was just a matter of experimenting, right? It was just like, all right, let's test this theory. I feel pretty good about it. And I had already established the relationships. So it was just, how do we transfer that over to NEMT? And so we got started with one person, and then that person became the manager, and we started hiring. And then it started with dispatching. It ended up becoming, customer service, fleet management, driver relations. We started hiring. We hired a hiring manager, HR for this. So it just, everything over time just started to become automated. So 80%, I would say, of our business was automated. And the rest was just, it was just us focusing on business, networking, relationships, so on and so forth.
Okay, so just to get into the nuts and bolts of it a little bit, you started with dispatching operations. You had some person in the Philippines going into your dispatch platform and assigning trips to vehicles based on what they thought makes sense. They essentially, had to use some of the tools in your software, learn the area themselves, learn the software, and then piece by piece, you got other, like the invoicing, the customer service, like, hey, calling up whoever's sending you the trips to solve issues. Like, you found that their English was good enough. You found a way for them to communicate, manage the time difference, all that stuff. I mean, it all sounds like easy breezy. 1, 2, 3, 4. Kept auto. Like, what were the difficult parts of making that happen?
Yeah, it definitely wasn't easy. I'm not gonna lie. Like it's a simple process. The implementation is usually where the difficulty lies, right? The process itself, we like to keep as simple as possible, but they're only as good as you're willing to invest in them, right? As much as you're willing to teach them, show them policies and procedures, train them. And so,
what were the difficult parts about implementing this outsourcing and making it work for you?
I think it was learning their culture, like learning how they operate and what they respond to in terms of the repetitive nature of having to tell them, and being very specific with instructions and what you want, like limiting as much thinking as possible, and being very detailed with, if this happens, then we need to tell them this. Like here we say it's like common sense, right? Because we're so familiar, but to them, they really just don't know. They don't understand the nature of the business. And so it was that part. It was just being very meticulous about really communicating and creating a culture around what do you guys need, and then responding, as opposed to like, hey, just do this, and then thinking they're just going to handle it. So that blew up in our face.
Make it concrete for me.
Yeah. So for example, if a vehicle, like if a driver wasn't answering, right? If a driver just didn't want to answer that morning or didn't clock in, we would I would think like, okay, just reassign it to another driver, right? And they wouldn't. And so you would have to say, okay, if this happens, if there's a trip by 8:30, by 7:30, an hour prior, if you don't hear anything from a driver, you immediately transfer that over to a new driver that's available, right? So that it was like creating that cookie cutter policy, being very specific, and that way they can see 1 hour, new driver, like there's nothing to worry about, right? Because that's they want to do their best, and so they don't want to make mistakes sometimes, and that tends to like be pacified if you're very clear with what you want and how you want it.
Yeah. So by the time that you were like 30 vehicles and you had this whole operation going in the Philippines, like how many people in the Philippines were working on your business? Like you had 80% of it automated away, right?
Yeah, it's like 15. I would say the most around 15 to 20. I would say, yeah, include full time and part time. I would say between 15 and 20. I could be off a little bit, but that was the number I could recall.
Okay. So these 15 to 20 people, if you could just like name out the handful of different areas they worked on. So one is dispatching, there's customer service. Like what are the actual different areas they handled for you?
Yeah, so dispatching was a big one, right? That's the scheduling, and then they had drivers where they would manage the fleets. They would have them send them pictures. That whole, before you guys had all that on the app, we had to do that manually. So then we have HR, where we started sending them, job descriptions. They would go through the interview process, and then at the end is when I would meet the driver and train them. They were handling the phone calls and the emails, so customer service, a lot of that was handled. The invoicing, the billing, they would do all of that. Essentially everything, they did everything. I mean, they did everything except for the relationships with the brokers and, the any other relationships we had business wise. Apart from that, like they did everything, and I made sure of it. Like I, if there's something that can be done and automated that doesn't require me personally, I'm the first one to outsource it, right? So yeah, they did all of it. Yeah.
So you got 15 to 20 people in the Philippines doing 80% of the work for your business. They're doing everything except for managing the broker relations and actually driving the vehicles, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And then there's you, and you're just one person managing this entire team of 15 to 20 people who are doing all these tasks for you?
Yeah, me and my business partner. No, it was me and my business partner.
Okay. Yeah. And how long were you running with those, like 30 vehicles and like 15 to 20 people in the Philippines doing all this work for you?
2-3 years. It was like from COVID, I would say 2019 to 2022, around then, when I ended up leaving. Yeah.
So after 2 to 3 years of that, you realize, hey, this Philippines outsourcing thing, that's the way to go. More NEMT businesses can use that. And you start getting these Philippine people to do their operations for other NEMT businesses around the country. Can you talk about how you basically grew Medivance Outsourcing?
Yeah. So Medivance didn't grow that. It hit a ceiling, right? We didn't grow as much as we wanted to, but the system itself was, we have a formula that we've utilized personally, right? We did it on 2 different companies, and we saw the success of it. We saw the impact it had, not only on our company, but the amount of money we're saving, right? Overhead costs, and allowing us to then reinvest that into other avenues of the business, whether there's marketing, growth, sales.
Can you tell me about the numbers? Like just, broad numbers. How much were you saving for all that work in the Philippines as compared to getting it done here in the US?
I mean, just think about it, right? Like, and it'll differ based on where you are. Like if you're in California, you're paying what, $20 minimum wage, right? We were paying $5 per hour when it came to our workers, right? So we didn't have to pay for overhead costs, insurance, unionized, all that, like, all of that we didn't have to pay for. So just think $5 an hour, put that number into whatever your employee is. And yeah, I mean, we were saving a lot. I mean, we were netting a lot, compared to everybody else, because of that system. So yeah, I'm not going to get into like specifics, but it was good.
No, that's good. That's good high level numbers.
Yeah.
So you start, when was the first time you had your Philippines team start working for another NEMT business that was not Elite Care Transports?
As soon as it was 2023. So I think last year is when we launched Medivance,
Okay.
like unofficially.
Can you tell me about the journey? Like, how was it getting another NEMT client?
It was Yeah, it was incredible. I mean, that's when we knew, like, it was like, all right, let's test this on a new company that we were working on. I mean, it was one of our own, but it was like, let's implement this new one because we started doing like school routes, right? That was another way we diversified. And we said, okay, it worked there. The only issue with like Elite Care is we had created so many bad habits when we first started that implementing the Medivance, it required us to downsize. So we never really got to see the full effect of it, right? We never really got to see it in its like natural state. And so
What
when we had
habits, what do you mean?
like not doing driver training. We weren't focused on like quality. We weren't hiring the right people. The systems weren't in place in terms of like policies and procedures. We just didn't. We hit the ground running. We did really well, and we were just chasing after money, right? We fell into we fell into the the hamster wheel that we talked about, the rat race. And so once we got a really good contract, it was like, okay, we need to rethink our business model. And so when we started implementing, a lot of it required downsizing. I mean, you can't do both at the same time. So it's like we have to reset the foundation of how we operated our company. But by that time, I was already out. So once we had the new company, we said, okay, let's start with Medivance from scratch. Like, let's implement them right away. And then, yeah, man, it was night and day.
Okay.
Yeah.
So Medivance is, this company of Philippines-based people, NEMT businesses outsource. It's a package. They'll do your dispatching, your customer service, your billing and invoicing, what have you. You apply that to another NEMT business who has better habits. It works like a chime, I assume.
Yeah, flawlessly. Yeah.
Okay. And then you're like, hey, we've got something here. We can expand this to other NEMT businesses. Talk to me about that journey.
Yeah. So at that point, it's like, yeah, we have something, because I was getting a little tired, honestly, of like wheels on the ground. We wanted something that could be scaled easily, like within the system, and create a software around it. And Medivance just made the most sense, right? We saw the pain points that a lot of other TPs were going through, especially the ones that were tied to brokers, because you're already net negative, whether they realize it or not, right? When you work with most brokers, you're not in a place where you have the financial means to reinvest into your company. It's like, it's a bad system. So we're like, okay, if we can bring this to the market and start helping these type of companies, because at that point we started expanding into sales and marketing. So we got our team to start, reaching out to contractors, private pay, all that. So if we can implement this system and share it with other TPs, I mean, it's a win-win. It's like you guys are going to save on costs, on time, the freedom. It's a no-brainer, right? And so that's kind of what we want to bring. And it was easier for us to operate. We didn't have to worry about liabilities, lawsuits with NEMT, and you got all these, like, it's just like, let's step away from it. I've been in it for a while. Let me do something that I can be like remote and live a certain lifestyle around. And so Medivance just made the most sense.
Okay. So you have this thing going, and then you start getting new NEMT customers for this Philippines outsourcing operation called Medivance. How do you get customers? Like, just, word of mouth, posts on social media, people say, hey, I'm interested. And then is it like a turnkey process? Like, hey, you want this outsourcing? Boom, we make it happen for you.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's word of mouth. We had we had our team really do the marketing. So like Facebook groups, we created our own. We started doing email marketing, cold calls. I mean, you just utilize everything, right? Because when you have them, they can do it all. So we kind of just gave them the blueprint, and we would find a few clients. I mean, we didn't scale or hit. We paused it temporarily, but we were able to get a few contracts, and we were able to implement it, and it worked. I mean, it did really well. So the system, the growth of it, the feedback we were receiving, I mean, it's a good model, to say the least.
So let's talk a bit about what you're doing now then. So you are basically just full-time focused on helping other people in all sorts of ways. Tell us about it.
Yeah, no, it's just like a coaching it's coaching services catered to helping online, like other online coaches to create a system that automates, right? Similar to what we did, to where they can then, it's a whole different world from NEMT. It's a whole different world. I mean, if they want to look, they can go to noahnuru.com. But
and by the way, I'm putting the link to noahnuru.com in the description of this video. You can check it out.
Yeah. But it's completely separate from NEMT. Although I am open to the opportunity. If people watch this video and they need help, like with consultations and guidance on how to navigate their business, it's something I'm open to. So let me know if that's the response you get. But it's just not my focus right now. Yeah.
What would you say to an NEMT business owner who's maybe early in their journey, they want to grow their business, and they hear like, okay, I could, make a lot of savings and automate things away by outsourcing a lot of the, daily tasks to the Philippines or somewhere else? Like, what are the steps to go about, at least the initial steps to making that happen? Like, do they go try to find a company like Medivance and just get a turnkey solution? Or would you recommend they do things, like take some initial steps on their own? What would you say?
Yeah. So me personally, I like to do things the easy way. So if there's already a company that's doing something and they've catered it to my niche, then that's where I'll go, right? So Medivance is where I would go because it removes so many other barriers of entry of like teaching and having to create those programs and systems. So if you're new, one, I would get a mentor. I mean, that's something I would have done. It's someone that's already been there, that's done it. And that way I can have some type of roadmap. And then with Medivance or an outsource, I would start with one in the beginning because they really do help you focus on the business, right? They'll do the they'll do the invoicing, they'll start to, apply to the brokers, private pay, and having someone that can do all those things, really helps you and your energy so you don't burn out, because it's really easy to burn out in NEMT. It's very easy. And so having someone that you can pay $5 an hour or whatever, depending on the level of expertise you need, I mean, it's a no-brainer. I mean, if you want a peace of mind and you want to enjoy what you're doing and you want to live a certain way, then yeah. But if you want life to be difficult, then do it all yourself.
Let me push back on this no-brainer piece, because I'm sure that you've come across plenty of other NEMT business owners who are like, hey, Noah, you're saying this is a no-brainer, but I have hesitations about outsourcing for X, Y, and Z reasons. Like, what are the top reasons people get nervous about outsourcing?
It's usually the language barrier, right? It's usually this, which was true maybe 10 years ago. But I think that the disconnect between cultures, I think that's one of it, one thing. And then I honestly think most NEMT owners aren't really business people. Like, they're not businessmen and women, right? They're like almost like self-employees. And so this notion of hiring someone and having to become like an entrepreneur, where you're now delegating, you're creating operation systems. A lot of the people listening aren't equipped to do those things. Like, they don't want to do those things. They want to do everything themselves. They want to have their hands in everything. They want to micromanage. And so if that's their mentality, then obviously this isn't for you. But anyone who's listening and understands the importance of like scaling and having the right systems, the right foundation, because if you scale without that, you're just scaling your problems. You're scaling your stress, you're scaling, you're shortening your lifespan. Like that's not the way to go. So like you can only make so much money doing it the wrong way. But if you have the right foundation and you're profitable, right? You're actually looking at your P&Ls, you can see that you're making money. Then it's like, there's going to be some hurdles, but it's worth it. I mean, it's business. You can't avoid hurdles. So you might as well just pick the right ones that are going to give you, the returns that make sense, literally.
That was very well said. You're only scaling your problems.
100%, man. Yeah.
noahnuru.com. The links are in the description of this video. Noah, what are some final thoughts that you'd like to share with the audience?
Have a plan. I know you did a video with Welena like a month ago. She's really good at like creating business plans. I would say have a plan, know where you're going, right? Choose the right markets, not the most convenient market, not the market next door. Choose a market that makes sense. Because if I had done all this in California, it would have been a different story. So coming to Texas, it wasn't saturated. The rates were incredibly high. It was easy to get contracts. So make sure you do your research prior and just map out and know where you're going in terms of business and financially. Because I told you, we made a lot of money. We made millions of dollars, but we didn't have a plan for it financially. So if you don't make a plan for money, money makes its own plans, and it goes away quick. So get your P&Ls, like pay attention. It's a business, right? Like have your money in order, and know where it's going. Set yourself up for the right, success. And that's why I think, the broker model, I wouldn't recommend it unless you're just getting started. Go for private pay as soon as possible. You have some amazing videos on private pay. I think one of them was like 100% private pay for like 10 years or like since the beginning. Yeah. So like those models are necessary now, because that money is what you're going to use to really grow your business. That's how you reinvest in your quality. But if you start off on the wrong foot, with brokers and the margins are tight, it's really difficult to apply anything I'm saying, right? So you want to make sure you're setting yourself up in the right. If you don't, it's not even worth getting into. It's not. It's like you could tell all your friends you have a business if that's what you want. All right, cool. But at home when you sleep at night, you're not making money. So be smart, have a plan financially, be aligned, know your numbers, and then take advantage of technology, man. Like Bambi is incredible. Outsourcing, like really immerse yourself in the future, not just stuck now. You have the automation, you have tech, you have AI. Like take advantage of these resources, because the companies that do are the ones that are going to succeed in the future. Whereas a lot of these other mom and pop shops maybe still doing Excel sheets. God forbid if they're still doing Excel sheets, it's only a matter of time before they're going to run themselves out of business. So take heed, watch these videos, man, and have fun, man. Have fun.
I love the way you articulate things. Like if you don't have a plan for money, money makes its own plans.
Yeah, I'm speaking from the soul, man. I've learned a great deal. So
speaking from the soul. Thank you so much for your time.
Run, Bambi, run. All right. God bless, man. Appreciate you, man.
Thank you.